Welcome to the Some Laugh podcast.
It could be like, oh, that was some laugh, or there was just some laughs.
Some laughs.
Well, no promising all laugh.
No, there's going to be some.
It's some laugh.
Steve was just telling me in the car he had to do a self-tape this morning for the role of a da. Steve's getting da roles
I'm
now.
up for da in a CBBC thing. I'm up for da roles.
How old are the kids that you're meant to be the dad of?
Yeah, no, they're great. About 11, I think the wee girl
God,
is.
that's quite old.
But I mean, I could have had her at 20. I'm 31, so
Aye.
technically the math it does work out.
Still a diggle, innit?
Aye, it didn't feel nice.
No, it doesn't feel nice. I once got woken up at 10 o'clock. Or no, I didn't get woken up. I was in a bath and then I was like chilling out and Tom Stade phoned me to ask me to come down and do this filming with Mason. And I was like, why? It's like 10:30 at night. And he's like, yeah, we did have somebody else, but when you put them, they're playing Mike Wilmot's girlfriend. When you put them next to her, it just looks fucking wrong. It looks really obscene. And I'm like, have you like getting me out my bed at 10:30 on a Monday night to say that I look like I'd shag Mike Wilmot? I said, that's not the fucking way, mate. I was like, Mike Wilmot could be my granddad. What the fuck are you talking? I'm not that old. I did get down there and it was obscene. They were quite right. The girl was about 17. It was like,
Yeah, that's creepy.
Right, Jesus.
it was one of Mason's pals. She was probably about 20, but she looked 17.
Aye. How old is he? Like 60s?
7.
Late 60s.
Late 60s? So
You'd
you were more
probably-
age appropriate, were you?
Apparently. But I was
Something
maybe
less
like,
scandalous.
I was like maybe 35 then.
Aye.
So
But thanks for joining us. So I didn't know you went to drama school, actually.
yeah, I went to drama school. Yeah, I went to drama school.
What was that like? Because I'm always quite jealous of stand-ups who've had some sort of performing background, because I always
Yeah.
feel like I could fucking use a bit of that. Did you think
could
that
still
helps
go.
you now? Like, well, I suppose no. But what was it
rad
like,
over
and
the
does it?
picture,
Do you
but-
find it gives you a good grounding for then going on and doing stand-up?
I suppose so. Like, is it things like being able to breathe properly and stuff like that?
How do you mean?
and, well, like using your diaphragm, and so I find like during the Fringe, stand-ups are always going on about how, oh my god, I've lost my voice, and like I've never struggled with that. I've never lost my voice. I've never had any problems with my voice. Like I do like 3-4 shows a day during the Fringe, and I've never. And I think that's probably to do with training.
Can
So
you teach us how to breathe
yeah,
quickly,
how do you
please?
do
'Cause
it?
I don't know how to breathe.
I
You
always
like
thought that was
breathe
just to
in
do
your
with drinking.
diaphragm into
What?
your like diaphragm, like so like your breath should come from here. So when you put your hand on your stomach and you take a deep breath in, your hand should expand. So like if you're breathing properly,
You sound like you're struggling here. You sound like you've just done
it's the
10K.
same as like
That sounds
yoga.
like
We're now a
pug.
meditation app. a meditation
So
podcast.
you like take a deep breath in through your nose, then this part of your chest should expand. So that's your diaphragm there.
I feel like I would do that naturally, though. No. Well, how
Maybe
do
you
how
breathe
do
properly.
people?
People usually like breathe into here, and like they use their voice box instead of using their diaphragm, and that's how you strain your voice.
Oh,
I think, if I remember correctly from my training,
That's
maybe
cool.
there's somebody watching that. It's a load of shit. It
You're
was
ripped off.
like 20 odd years ago. So.
Maybe that's why you're getting the roles of da parts, because you're breathing heavily.
I don't know if that's Daz or.
What's this guy up to in this script?
it's a CBBC show,
Yes,
guys.
very
So
good.
That's interesting, because I always just assume that people lose their voice at the Fringe because they're drinking too
Drinking
much.
and all that.
That's
Well, it's
certainly
not
what-
helping.
No.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably doesn't help.
Yeah,
But I like not so much now because I've got the wee one and everything. But I did drink and still kept my voice.
Still it just shows you breathing. It's like all that stuff that's like so. It's like all that Wim Hof shit and all that. And it's like
Cold
breathing
showers.
and cold showers. All these sort of things that I suppose you never really think about too much. But I guess that has a big impact.
you
doesn't it?
done
Like,
cold showers, didn't you?
I did for a wee while. I tried
I
to
do
have a
it
cold
sometimes.
shower during the start of the day, but it was mainly the theory behind it was like just do something that you don't want to do first thing in the morning, and then you'll get right. Like instead of putting stuff off, you'll just go right. I've done that, so now I can
Right. Did
go
it
to the
work?
gym or whatever. Aye, it would work actually, but I can never be arsed doing it. Also,
So it didn't work.
I was doing it in the middle of winter in Scotland, which is fucking
Yeah.
brutal, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
whereas now I probably could use it actually because it's so fucking hot, isn't it?
It's like that cold water therapy, isn't it? It's supposed to like shock your body. It's an adrenaline thing.
Aye.
Yeah.
That's why all the like menopausal mermaids do it.
I was just in Kilkenny last weekend, right? And there's a guy, his name is, he's a comic from Ireland, and he was telling us a story about how he was on a date with a lassie and she started eating seafood, and he said that was like a big turn. He's like, that's a big red flag, right? And we're like, what? And then he's like, right, I'll tell you the real reason why I think it's a red flag. And they're like, right. And he's like, I believe in mermaids. And we're all like, what? And it turns out he's I don't know, he's got some mad belief about mermaids and he thinks you shouldn't eat seafood because they're part mermaid or something. I don't know.
That's
But it was
fucking
like
insane.
the absolute last thing that we could ever expected to have heard out of his mouth. It was great.
That's insane.
Was he
But
not
also,
taking the piss?
how are prawns and mermaids related? That's like,
I've no idea. Well, I think the problem is, how do you think mermaids are real, first of all? And then it gets onto the...
Yeah.
but you get people who like dress as mermaids
Yeah.
and swim in the sea and
I've seen those
really?
at like
Yeah.
aquariums and stuff.
in
Or
aquariums,
you
and
get-
but actually just in the sea. They keep interviewing them on This Morning. There's a mad woman that they just randomly interview.
They'll do anything to take the heat off the
They
current
will do.
story.
Yeah, the current situation. This
Where's
is
that one
the
that's
current
mad?
situation that I did see the mermaid woman on. She was on loads of times.
What's
I was
happening
like,
with her legs though? Is it like she in like a...
she's got like a mermaid tail.
fabric
Right, okay.
thing.
Yeah.
Like it should be, it would be dodgy, wouldn't it? Really
you could
dodgy.
You can just
Drown,
drown.
innit?
Dead
Yeah.
easy.
But you can buy them for kids. Like there's ones that you can buy, like flipper things that go, and they're really expensive.
Yeah.
Because I looked at buying one for my niece because she's right into mermaids, like for going on holiday. But they were like $89.99. I
Oh,
was
really?
like, no.
Fuck
Tried to
that.
get one off Vinted. Second-hand mermaid tail. Your pal wouldn't like that. That's
No.
that's a deed mermaid. You're giving her.
Protesting it.
Also, it's probably a dodgy way. That you'd probably end up drowning if you bought it from like some
Snyder mermaid.
Yeah, some Snyder mermaid.
Yeah, but no, fucking send that back.
I'm addicted to Vinted. I'm like head to toe in Vinted at the
Really?
moment. I don't like.
I've never
I've
been
not
on.
fucked with it yet.
Is it the same as like Etsy and stuff?
No, it's like Depop. It's just it's
Depop for vintage clothes. Is that what it is?
It's kind well, you can sell anything on it. I just happen to buy kind of more vintage styles.
Aye. I'd have just assumed with the name.
Vinted.
Vinted.
Yeah, I actually
Ah.
don't know. I mean, I've sold a whole load of like Marvel 2-year-old T-shirts on it, so I don't like to do like.
We should mention at this point, Jay does have a small child.
Yeah, it's like a weird get
I
rich
don't
quick
just
scheme.
buy small T-shirts and then sell them on as a kind of second job.
So the breathing was the main thing that you
Yeah.
thought you got for the acting stuff then?
Probably breathing, and also probably how to deal with other people's delusion.
Right.
Big thing in
And why would you need that in comedy?
Ask Stuart right there. Yeah, there was a lot. I didn't really enjoy drama school, to be honest.
Why?
Like, I mean, I liked it. I liked going to drama school before I'd left school.
Aye.
And then when I went to drama school full time, like, I just felt it was full of really delusional people.
Really?
Where was this?
So I went to drama school in Greenock, like from
Right.
when I was about 8 years old. I went to Carol Fry's, and then I went to RSAMD,
Where's
which is
that?
now the Conservatoire.
Oh, right.
But I'm
okay.
really
big
old,
one.
Stuart. You've got to remember.
Right. Yeah, sorry.
It was called RSAMD when I was there, but it's now the Conservatoire.
Right.
And so when did you get into stand up for there? Did you do acting for a fair bit beforehand or
No, I wasn't very good.
right?
I think anybody that's seen anything I've been in, I'll be. I wasn't like.
Is that why they changed the name? Just
Yeah, they were like, oh
Just distance
God,
yourself from that.
get rid of her. I had once had. I did one of Keir's plays during the Fringe one year. I was pregnant when I was doing it as well, and there was a load of things that went wrong that had nothing really to do with my acting. But I think one of the reviews said that I mistook volume for pathos, and I went,
Wow.
fair enough.
Jesus.
Probably that's probably fine.
So we're saying like the quieter you are, the more emotional it is. Is that
Yeah, I
what they're
think
getting
probably. I think that's maybe what I was doing.
think
I did
that's-
it different
that's what I
every
would do.
single day. I used to so I was doing it with Jojo Sutherland and Vlad Paulson and Vladimir McTavish, and they used to laugh because I would never deliver the line the same way twice. We did it for 28 days, and I don't think I ever did it the same.
Keeps it fresh though.
Yeah,
doesn't
it did. I felt it was fine. I mean, we got some good reviews too, but I
How,
don't.
how do you feel like if you get that review for that, or like a kind of a bad review for comedy. Would you think is worse, getting it for comedy because it's your own personal stories? Sorry, yeah.
Can't relate.
I'm not saying that you've got loads of bad reviews for comedy.
Steve Bennett's never sarcastically said that your career's going places, or is that just Steve?
He said that to me.
No, he's never said that. Sarcastically or otherwise. In any way, shape or form. I suppose, like, I don't know. I don't think it's ever nice to get slagged off in any way, shape or form.
But I guess if it's for someone else's writing, then you're a bit like, well, it's not my fault.
Well, it's his
husband's
writing.
Your husband's
Yeah,
writing.
it wasn't for the writing. There was nothing wrong with the play. It was the acting.
Is the volume which
I mean,
you delivered it?
It was the volume I was doing it at, for
Really, because
sure.
Jojo and Vlad had lost their voices, you were the only one that could hear.
Yeah, that was the only one that could still speak. I mean, it was a really good play. It was called Madame George, and Jojo played a sidekick in it, and I was the kind of twist at the end, but we had some problems with direction, and also a week before the Fringe started, the play was supposed to be 57 minutes long, and the preview was an hour and a half.
Jesus Christ.
And the first hour I wasn't in, so so basically they were like, we're gonna have to cut half an hour, and I'm like, that's my whole bit. Like, and that was the big like reveal plot twist thing, so it had to get totally, there was a problem with the direction, and then like, so
Yes, how did you manage to cut it down? Is that
quite
literally
brutally, I
just-
think. So there was it was a bit of a brutal cut.
But I suppose if it ever went on tour, it's like you could, an hour and a half would be ideal.
Oh,
for,
aye, totally. I mean,
that.
it was unfortunately it was kind of scuppered by COVID, because it was an idea to take it on tour. And actually, the first scene in it between Madame George and Vlad's character was brilliant. It was a really fun and like really sharp scene, and I think it could actually have stood alone, like as a one-act play, even just with that scene. And it's like a sidekick reading this man whose wife's dead, and like she's obviously pretending to be her, and it was all this stuff to do with Marks and Spencers and dining for two and I'm eating the pudding in the bus and stuff. And it was really funny. And then I came in at the end and fucking all. It was a good play.
Yeah, it sounds
Probably without me in it. It was amazing.
So you say you didn't feel you were the best actor.
No.
You get into stand up,
Yeah.
and see at the time you started stand up, like there couldn't have been a lot of other female comics on the Scottish circuit.
No, there was.
When did you start? Sorry.
2000 and like 20 years ago, 2003.
Right. Well.
Yeah. So there was Jojo, who hadn't started long before me, maybe a few months before me. Susan Calman, Susan Morrison, Janie, and a few people who are not in it anymore that you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was probably, try to think who else from the Scottish side. That was the main ones. I'm probably forgetting somebody, and no doubt I'll get a phone call. Thanks very much, Jay.
And do you feel like is it pure night and day, like what the circuit was like then compared to what it is now in terms of like that kind of thing of it being male dominated and all that sort of stuff?
I think it's night and day.
No, I mean,
still
it's slightly
going.
better.
Yeah.
It's slightly better, but even in recent times, I think like now, like for
I mean,
like
you're
some
on a
monkey bar-
podcast with three
this is it, I know,
guys right now, I
What's
suppose.
it like being in a male dominated environment? Jay?
Backed in the corner, surrounded.
I was surrounded by me straight white men. Oh, it's just night and day, Mark. Absolutely night
Well, I
and
mean,
day.
I feel like these days, like you go on monkey bar or whatever, and like there'll always be it's more of a mixture now these days. Obviously still no by any stretch like 50-50 or anywhere near it. London and stuff's a bit different for that, I think, now, but like but it must have been like I guess it was just like so much worse back in the day with that stuff.
I mean, definitely there was not a lot of women, and also you were kind of like, to progress was really difficult because you were just shoved always in the middle. Just didn't matter what your ability was, you were just shoved in the middle. So I think it's like, it has massively changed for the better, and it's amazing now. Like, I love watching all the women who are coming up, and like not even just the things that they're talking about and the things that they're doing, because I've very much felt like I couldn't talk about anything to do with women, like anything women's based. I couldn't talk about because guys would just like roll their eyes. And
when you started out,
when I started out, so you wouldn't like do a period joke. You wouldn't, particularly slag off men, or like. It was a lot more difficult. You had a very small amount of stuff that you could talk about without people rolling their eyes. And also I was really young, so I was like 21 when I started. And I would come on stage, you'd have to deal with the men who were like, oh, for fuck's sake, a woman. But you would also have to deal with women who would be like, oh, and who does she think she is? And like crossing arms. And that's totally changed now. So like when you come on stage, particularly young women now are like, oh yeah. They're like, yes, thank God, a woman, and there
was none of the woo back in that day.
No, there was no yes, queen. It's like, who the fuck does she think she is? Like, arms folded,
queen.
and if I remember once in a gig in Paisley, it was me, Mark, and Billy Kirkwood, because we all kind of started together, and we started with this kind of collective called the Don Quixote Appreciation Society. I had nothing to do with the name. I didn't even know who Don Quixote was. I was and we used to do this. We used to do this like regular monthly gig in the Ship in Glasgow, and then we get given this gig in Paisley, and we went down, and I was comparing. I hadn't been long comparing, and I started kind of laying into this guy who was with a group with a woman beside him, and I said to her, oh, is that your dad? And it wasn't her dad. It was her man. It kind of went downhill after that. And at the end of the gig, we were packing up the stuff, and I had my back to the audience, and Mark's like looking at me, and he's like, oh my God, she's coming. And she was really tough and hard. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get my head kicked in. And I kind of turned round, because we'd had all this like kind of backwards and forwards on stage. And I turned round and I just went, oh, that was pure amazing. You really made that gig. That was great. Me and you, we had that whole thing going on, and it was brilliant, wasn't it? And she was like, oh, aye, it was good. It was good. And I was like, oh my God.
That's a good way to
batter me.
Because that's usually what hecklers say to us when they come up. So that's a good flipping on it. That is a belter. I'm going to use that if ever like
psychology.
Because sometimes you do get a bit too wide to something, and you're like, this guy fucking could batter me. It was brilliant, man. We should have a double act.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't imagine there be a lot of people that appreciate Don Quixote in fucking Paisley.
No, it was weird. I have no idea why we called it that. It was like me, Mark, Billy, a guy called David, another guy called Adrian. They don't do it anymore. But we'd all done Viv G's comedy course. And then kind of all, the best thing about, I mean, Viv G's comedy course is great, but one of the best things about it was that we all used to go to the pub afterwards and sit for hours and hours and just like chat. And then we started writing together. And then, we ended up with this for 3 or 4 years. We all kind of together.
So was it just like the same bill basically for the gigs?
We did sketches,
and
we did like we did the first ever Glasgow Comedy Festival.
Cool.
We had a gig on. We had 3 gigs, I think, during the Glasgow Comedy Festival, and it was like either Billy or I would compare. Mark and the other guys would do sets, and then we had like sketches in between.
Right. Cool.
So yeah.
Did you like that part? Was that your first sort of time trying your acting background in with stand-up as well, or?
Yeah, well, I'd done improv, but I hadn't long been doing stand-up, so I was used to doing like scenes, and we did some improv in that show as well. So I was used to doing like improvisation and sketches, and I felt more comfortable with somebody else on stage with me. Whereas all the boys felt comfortable on their own. Like used to people listening.
I always love hearing stories about like the circuit back then, like before, because I think we take for granted like there's much sounds like anyways much more of an infrastructure now. Like you're saying that was like the first ever Glasgow Comedy Festival now.
Yeah.
For us, we just take it for granted that there's all these comedy festivals and this circuit and all these kind of gigs and all that sort of stuff. And like I guess it was a bit more like the Wild West back then, and you'd have all these like mad gigs, like like there's a guy Max Starr that I never met.
Yeah.
Oh God, do you know?
Legendary figure.
But it was
I don't know if we've ever spoke about
I don't
him
think we've spoken
before.
about it in the podcast.
You've never spoke about
We should
Max
do like a
Starr?
Max Starr special where we get everyone that was on the circuit 20 years ago to tell their favourite Max
It's
Starr
like,
story.
see, on Open Goal, there's like hundreds of people do these fucking stories about Tommy Gravison and how mental he is. I think that should be us. But
Yeah.
did you have you got any Max Starr stories? Like, so for the listeners, that's a guy that used to run comedy gigs back in the day, and it was always in just like mad random gigs, like
Pubs and
fucking
stuff.
wee like back arse and nowhere places in
Yeah.
Scotland, eh?
And he said he was from Tasmania, but we're pretty sure that he was actually English.
Aye.
And putting on an accent. So I think Alan Anderson once found his driver's license and it was a totally different name. His name was Max Star. Well, not that we really thought his name was
Yeah.
Max Star, but like
I'd be surprised if that.
he had a whole load of material that definitely would get you cancelled now. There's that he used to do.
And probably should have then by the sounds of it.
It was pretty brutal. But he used to also, he was like total Walter Mitty, you know, he would make up stories, and there's a comedian who actually tried to do the Max Star timeline and tried to like figure out how old he was by all these stories that he told about himself. And like one of the big stories was that he'd been in prison. And the reason he'd been in prison was because he'd accidentally killed a man with a kung fu thing that he'd learned off of a Chippendale. And the reason that he knew the Chippendale was that they'd get into a fight with him at a bar and accidentally broke his leg and had to go on tour with the Chippendales, but gave him all the money because he'd broken his leg. Like, just madness. And he'd been married to all these like different women, and he'd been in Neighbours. He said he'd been in Neighbours. He'd been in Home and Away. He'd been in Prisoner Cell Block H. We're like, is that not a women's prison? What's going on? And yeah, so he would tell all these stories, and before he would bring you on, he would compare, like he'd do 45 minutes at the top, and it would just be a random pub that didn't want stand-up comedy, and you know, he would just put a mic up and just start talking. He just used to put a bucket round at the end, and but he would do things like it, and I don't know if it's true, but it was pretty horrendous. He told us that he'd lost a child when they were an infant, and quite often what he would do is he would tell this story about the loss of his child on stage, and then he would say, because he was a musical act, right, and then he would go, I'm just going to sing this song and it's dedicated to my child. He would sing this heartbreaking, heart-wrenching song, and then he'd go, great, next up, Jay Lafferty. Oh my God. But you learned a lot. Like, I got my first ever Fringe gigs were Max Star Fringe gigs. Wow. Yeah. First time I ever played the Fringe, like I'd been in the Fringe as an actress.
Uh-huh.
I'd done the Scottish play quite a few times. In the Fringe, and but the first time I did stand up was in a basement bar that's under, I don't really even know what it actually is now, like if it is nothing now, but it was, you know where McDonald's is when you come up from the station in Edinburgh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like on the way up to the stand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There was a bar that went underground there.
Oh really?
And that's he used to run gigs there every single day during the Fringe.
Right. Like mixed bill gigs.
Just
and
mixed
stuff.
bills, yeah. And he would be there all day, and they were on like all day. Like it was just him all day. He would just go down, and you would just be able to get on. That's where I did my first ever kind of stand up at the Fringe.
Did they ever pay you or anything?
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's wild as well that he just done a bucket then. So he couldn't have obviously had a budget to tell you how much you were getting paid to drive to fucking Aberdeen or something to do a gig if he's just putting a bucket in at the end.
Oh, there's some horrendous stories, but I would never travel with him because he
Right.
was a bit of a creep.
Aye.
To put it
Really?
This guy?
Is that great?
that's terrible, isn't it? I can't.
No, if
he
he's
The
a
was-
thing
creep,
is
he's
that
a
having a name like that we can never be sued for telling stories about him because we're not saying his real name. In fact,
Yeah.
nobody even knows what it is. You just thought it was some cunt for
I
all you
can't
know.
remember what I thought. I did know at the time what his name was, but also he had this whole thing he told everybody on the circuit. You need to get. Have you had Scott Agnew on?
No,
No,
yeah.
I need to get him on.
So
yeah.
Scott Agnew, because Scott Agnew was an investigative journalist, and so he had this. He has
Andy loves
this.
a gossip.
Andy loves a
In many ways, he
gossip.
still is an investigative journalist.
Yes, he'd done this deep dive on him because he told us that he had testicular cancer. And he had a little, again, this is going back like 15 years, so, you know, I was a lot younger and not married, and he used to have a thing for me, and he would, so he had this whole thing that he had testicular cancer, and he phoned me. I always remember this, it was at my pal's house, and it was like a Saturday afternoon, and it was like glorious weather, like it's been this last weekend. We'd all been out sunbathing and stuff, and I got this phone call from him, and he's like, hi Jay, he's like, I'm just going in to have like my ball removed for my I don't know why I'm whispering. My testicular cancer.
Is this the pathos that you're trying to get? Volume does not.
It's like, I just like, I want you to be like the last person that, you know, in case it goes south, and I just want you to be the last person that I spoke to. And I was like, all right. And I was quite upset, and I had like a long-term boyfriend at this point. There was nothing going on, but I was like a big softie and quite naive, and was like, all right, I hope it goes really well, and like hanging up. And remember saying to my pals, went back out onto the balcony thing, and I'm like, oh, telling them, they're like, oh, that's a shame, that's terrible. And no word of a lie, about 45 to 50 minutes later, my phone went again, and I answered it, and he was like, the operation went really well. And I'm thinking, what?
It's too quick.
Yeah.
That was really quick to have your ball removed.
Yeah, surely.
That's the thing. It's hard. It would be hard to take anything like that seriously, because the maddest story that I heard about him, I can't remember who's
the Cuba one.
The Cuba.
That's my favourite
They
one,
says that he played a gig in Cuba for Fidel Castro.
In like a football stadium.
Aye, and at the end, doves came out and they spelled out Max.
Butterflies.
Butterflies.
It was butterflies. Butterflies. Fidel Castro released butterflies, and they made the shape of a star.
People, I think, who were in stand-up before us, they always talk about how it's not as mental now as it used to be. There's not as many mental cunts. And there are loads of mental cunts, but there's no one like that.
No.
It's
Yeah.
like-
There was so many like real, because stand-up was like, it was much more open than it is now, and it was much easier to be a stand-up, right? You didn't have to wait for 7 months to get on Red Raw. You could literally phone up Eva and get on Red Raw the following week.
Right.
You know, when you first started out, it was really, you know, it was an underground circuit. There wasn't like Live at the Apollo wasn't on. There was nothing like that going on. It was all just, you know, and it was for people who didn't fit in anywhere, right? So we were all the weird kids at school. As some of us were much weirder than others. So, like there was what you call it, thingy finger, mud finger.
Mud finger. Yeah.
He was just.
So what was his thing? He just turns people into
He
mud.
just turns people into mud with his finger. He just would
I mean, it's
stand.
some act. I don't know how you'd pull that off.
You get him on.
Yeah.
He would just stand for ages going, "You're mud finger," and there was him, and then obviously the Hobbit, who's still kind
he's still
of
around.
He was
around.
Still going
But-
strong.
Yeah.
The Hobbit, and Silent Susie.
Silent Susie.
That was
that's
his
the
Hobbit's
Hobbit's girlfriend.
apprentice.
Sidekick.
Apprentice,
yeah,
apprentice sidekick. And she used to lock her in a cupboard and stuff. See, when you actually think back on it now,
Allegedly, don't
Allegedly. Hobbit's still alive.
He doesn't know
no,
how to
I mean
listen to
like
podcasts.
I don't mean he used to lock her in a cupboard. Like the relationship on stage,
Yeah.
like she would pop out of like the back of stage, or if there was a cupboard on the stage, she would pop out.
Were you there that night that you forgot to bring her out though?
Yeah, no, it was
Keir
Keir.
was.
It was
Yeah.
Keir that was there.
That's an amazing story.
I think it's Roscoe's got a story about the Hobbit. Asked him, he used to sell CDs after gigs or something. He's like, Roscoe, buy my CD. And so Roscoe's like, whatever. So he gave him like a 5 or a 10 or whatever it was. And then he went in his car and they stuck the CD in, and it was a blank CD.
See, I just like to think the Hobbit knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah,
It was
it's
just
an
all an
elaborate
act.
character act.
Yeah.
And nowadays people are like, oh, Roscoe's mental, isn't he? No. He's a normal guy. He's got trade and jokes.
Yeah. Well, there was loads of people with no jokes. That was like, that wasn't unnormal. Yeah. There was like lots of people who just got up and talked and were just, yeah. But now I think it's like much more of an industry, and it's much, you know, more difficult. And also if you screw up now, that's you. Like, you know, you don't really.
But also I think like back then you didn't have like Facebook and stuff, so you could lie and stuff and you could get away with it and no one would ever know the difference. But nowadays if you try and say that, people would just go, you know, oh,
If you
there's
said
no
you were in
proof.
Neighbours now, somebody would
Yeah,
go
they
on
go,
IMDb
there's IMDb,
like that.
yeah, exactly.
No, you're not.
You're not actually turning us into mud.
If you'd done a gig in a football stadium in Cuba, you'd have some fucking 40s it.
exactly.
Be on TikTok.
You do that thing where everyone does like pose with the, you know, the fucking crowd in the background.
The butterflies in the background.
The butterfly star in the background.
What was the sort of audience's patience for stuff like this? Like,
Grand.
yeah.
Yeah.
like, I
Was
feel
it?
like
Sit through anything.
More, would you say more back then than there is now?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, because there was a lot just more. Also, people didn't really know what to expect. So I suppose it's a bit like now it kind of works the other way, that if you've only ever seen like you've only ever seen stand up on the telly, and then you come to a proper like pub gig or even like a comedy club gig, and you're seeing somebody who's been quite like sanitized to a certain degree on TV. Maybe not so much with like YouTube, but even if you watch people's Netflix specials, that's obviously all been through lawyers. It's obviously all been kind of like, yes, that's okay to say that. No, you can't do that. And I still feel like now sometimes people come and they are quite like, oh gosh, you know, like, especially think people, like I remember like Fred Macaulay saying, because he'd been on the radio for years, and like it would be all these like wee women who'd heard him on BBC Radio Scotland doing the breakfast programme, and then they come and hear him doing stand up and he's talking about, you know, sex or whatever, and they're like, oh, clutching their pearls. So I think there's probably like more understanding of what stand up actually is now.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I mean, and also you would quite often, a lot of gigs were just set up against the audience's will. Like, do you know, they'd be just like in a pub having a pint, and the next thing there'd be somebody on a microphone going, hello, we're just doing a wee comedy night. And they'd be like, all right, I guess we'll stay. So there's a lot more of that.
Do you think those are they to me, I think, are always the hardest ones, where like you turn up at a pub and they don't know there's any stand up on it?
Yeah.
Can you think of one in particular, like what would be like the worst set up gig you've ever done?
Yeah, there was one out in the East End of Glasgow where I honestly did think we were going to be killed. Like, it was in a pub with no windows. Never a good sign.
Yeah, that's
And it was now really, I'll probably get this the wrong way around, but it was with Vlad and Kier and somebody else, maybe Rob Kane or somebody like that. And it was a really rough gig. It was mostly all men, because it was a pub with no windows, and women don't really frequent pubs.
Women
with no
love
windows.
natural light.
They do. They love a bit of natural light.
Not the big light though, but natural light.
It was a really, I think it was a really heavy Celtic area, and I think there was a bit of like, oh God, because Rob Kane is very Rangers. I think it was Rob Kane that was on, and we were just at the very back of this venue. So it was two pubs. The pub, was split in the middle, but with one bar connecting. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of old school kind of idea. So every now and then, the bar between the where the gig was happening would open, and where the football was happening next door, the sound would just like bleed through, and like guys were coming through from next door during the breaks of the football and things. And I'd been on, it was fine. And I think it was when Vlad was on, just a massive fight kick. Nothing to do with Vlad, but like a massive fight kicked off. And they were on that side of the pub, and I was on this side of the pub. I was near the door. I was like, can't I just leave them? And this massive fight going on. And it was, that one was pretty scary.
Fuck's sake.
What did you do? Did you run? No, I would have.
I went outside, but I was kind of trying to get them. And I was like, excuse me. And they just kind of hugged the wall all the way around and then get out the door. And then we stood outside because we were still due to get paid for ages. We're like, are we going to go? Are we going to try and get paid? And I think it was Rob Kane. I might be totally wrong, but I think he was like, no, I'm getting paid. So we did get paid, but it took about another hour and a half before the fight stopped and the police turned up, and then we're like, we're just waiting for our money.
That's you know, it's a rough gig when you're like, you need to wait and get paid, but you're also like, I just want to leave here as soon as possible because we might be in fucking danger, basically.
Yeah.
That's terrible, isn't it? So going for East End Glasgow, did you live in LA for a bit, Jay?
Yeah.
When did you do that? Was it after you started stand up?
No.
Beforehand?
Before, yeah.
So what made you move out there, and what did you get up to out there? Was this pursuing an acting career or?
Sure, let's do that. Let's go with that. I think
Okay.
that's probably what I've said before.
Is that right? What was it like it there?
Good, yeah. I mean, it was such a long time ago now. It was good. I had get in with a crowd of people who were on quite a big show at the time, and so I was quite well looked after.
Right.
Because I think if I'd gone out not knowing anybody, I would have it would have been a much different. It was a really like Hollywood at that time was quite seedy and like it's all cleaned up now and it's had gentrification and but at that time it was pretty. It's like 2001 too. And yeah, but I was really lucky because I was kind of looked after by a couple of friends that I knew that had gone out there to see.
Right.
And yeah, so I was there was still a lot of going to casting calls and then turning up and it was the back of somebody's van and you're kind of going,
Oh, fuck.
not entirely sure this is legitimate.
Yeah, well, when you said about gentrification there, I was assuming you were meaning the whole, Harvey Weinstein shit more than the neighbourhoods.
Well, neighbourhood as well, because it was West Hollywood, which is where I was on the up, and it had loads of like vintage T-shirt shops, and Starbucks was becoming like a thing at that point, and there was like a big Starbucks in the corner, and you would see like Quentin Tarantino. He had a video shop that was just up the road where that like everybody we used to go because that was the Blockbuster Video that he'd worked in, and that was all kind of in that area. But like actually where like downtown Hollywood where they would film like all the Saturday shows and everything like that was really grim.
Was it?
Like there was a lot of homelessness and a lot of prostitution and a lot of it was a pretty dodgy area, and downtown LA was like a no-go area.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, it was pretty grim. But as I say, I was kind of really well looked after because I had people who lived there. Like the guy that I lived with, he'd been there, he'd grown up there, and then the other guys that I kind of had fallen in with and were pals with, they'd come from New York. And were living there and stuff. So I was like, I'd kind of get set up with runners' jobs and things. So I was pretty, lucky. And,
nice.
But it was kind of at that time, the thing that I was really going for mostly was the kind of start of reality TV shows. So there was a lot of like reality TV stuff. And I thought, because I had a Scottish accent and stuff, that I'd be in, absolutely get in there. And I think it was a big wake up call because probably at that age I wasn't unattractive, but when I went to LA I was like a hobbit. Look at all these women who were the most stunning people you've ever seen in real life, and then you're just like, well, I've got an accent, I'm Scottish, I can be really Scottish for you. But yeah, there was like The Real World, that was like the big show at that time. They'd done The Real World New York, and they were trying to make a Real World Hollywood or Real World LA, and yeah, so I was trying to get in that. And
The Hills, was that one? The Hills?
No, this would be like
later,
before
I
The
think.
Hills.
Before, was it?
Yeah, this would be. I mean, I think we had Big Brother. Maybe the first or second Big Brother had been on
Right, okay.
at that time. It was really, really early. So yeah, I think before The Hills, because The Hills kind of passed me by. I was probably in my mid-20s by the time The
Right.
Hills came out. At this point, I'd have been like 19, 20.
Right. And did you do any like stand up there, or were you just?
I did improv.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so
Oh,
I
cool.
did like some groundling stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
How did you find that?
Good. I mean, that's basically what happened was when I came back, I thought, I really want to do improv, but you had to
not
kind
really
of
a
be in
big scene
uni
here,
to
is
do
it?
improv. Like it's not. I think now you could probably do improv and not be in university. Obviously that now there's like Will's group, and
Yeah.
there's that guy that's got a group in Glasgow, and there's quite a few. But then there was like the Improverts, and they were all at Edinburgh University, and Stu and Gary, and I was neither Stu or Gary, so and I wasn't in university, so that's how I ended up doing stand up.
All right.
Yeah.
Would you say like improv helps with like, or because you do a lot of comparing just now and stuff? Would you say that doing that back then has helped with that now, or do you think is it kind of different skills a wee
I
bit?
think it's probably, yeah. I mean, I think the thing was that I always did like comparing from even when I very first started, like with Mark and Billy. Billy and I did all like, that. We both naturally enjoyed comparing, and we both come from acting backgrounds. Like Billy came from an acting background too.
Oh, did I?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we both kind of enjoyed doing that. So I suppose at that point, I would say now, like I get asked to do Stu and Gary quite a bit, and I've been asked to do other improvisation things. I can't do accents, which was my main downfall as an actress. Like everything just comes out slightly racist. So like it doesn't matter where I start, I end up in Wales via Mumbai. So that's my big problem with improvisation.
Yeah, I'm not great at accents either.
Skipping forward a little bit, you've done a bunch of Fringe shows now. How many hours have you done at the Fringe?
I don't know.
Like full hours, not including like Max Star shows.
Not
and all
including
that.
Max Star shows. I've done, I don't know, 8 maybe. I've done five like full runs, but I had done other hours before that at the Fringe, but I didn't because I worked full time until 2014. So I hadn't done like a full run at the Fringe, but I'd done like the off days that everybody else takes off, which is brilliant because everybody comes to the Fringe not realising everybody they wanted to see had a day off. And so my show's always sold out. I think is the key.
Yeah, smart. Yeah. And this year you're doing a show. I seen a preview of it recently, and so you're doing. You're learning pole.
Yes, I'm learning pole dancing.
How did you decide to do that? What was the decision behind?
So the decision, I
wanting to do
guess, was like I always go into the Fringe with a plan. Like I always go in wanting to achieve something by the end of it. And in like previous years, it's been things like, you know, I wanted a 5-star review. So like that was my whole goal.
Right.
Was like to get, this is years ago, like I wanted, that was my goal with one of my Fringe shows. Another one was like I wanted it to be made into a radio show. Another one, I wanted to go on a wee tour with it.
All right.
So I always have like, for me, and what I feel is an achievable goal. Like I'm never going like, I want to win the award, because I think people, and there's so many of us that do that. I'm like, are you mad?
Yeah,
There's
that's
3,000 shows and you think your show is going to win the award? That's insane.
Yeah.
It doesn't even exist now as we currently speak.
As we
It's
currently
been-
speak, I know.
It's been binned at the moment, but there's not got a sponsor. But anyway,
Aye, so anybody who decided they were coming this year to win an award has had it.
Well,
Tommy
yeah,
was in
we're
the car,
speaking
yeah. I'm just picturing some like really rich open spot in London that's like thrown thousands of pounds to go, and there's not even a fucking award.
An
It's
award.
kind of funny.
Yeah, I'm
I
like,
know.
I hope there's not an award just for that reason.
Aw. So yeah, and obviously it's never to make money because that's insane as well. So this year, my goal was to push myself out of my comfort zone and learn a new skill. So I decided to learn pole dancing, which has been a mistake. It's so hard. Like I've broken bones.
Really?
Yeah, I've broken my toes. I've cracked my rib. I've torn muscles I didn't even know existed. Yeah, it was a bit insane.
It looks fucking solid.
Yeah,
Looks
it's
really hard.
Yeah.
It's a workout, isn't it?
Did you know how hard it was going to be when you?
Absolutely not. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I had done a bit of pole before in my 20s. But now when I look back on it, I'm like, oh, no, you didn't. You just kind of grinded against a pole. In my head, I thought, oh, aye, that was fine. I'll be able... And then, I don't know if it's like a combination of now it is such a high-level sport, you know, and people do it to such an amazing, you know, kind of high degree, and they're doing backflips. And so I don't know if it's that or if it's the fact that I'm 40 and things are just harder. I've got a lot more body weight to pull up a pole than I did when I was 20. And yeah, so it's been really difficult, but I've loved it. It's been an amazing journey. Like it's been really like kind of, I've met loads of really good people through it, and also there's been things that have happened that I wasn't expecting. Like I've met basically a whole new community of people, and like they're really supportive and
are the
fun.
pole community as mental as the comedy community? Or?
No, the pole community are.
Is there a
They're
Max
much
Star
more
of the...
namaste. Like they're definitely very much like the yoga community, the
Aye.
pole community. They're
There's no Max Star gigs, so you're just setting up a pole in the back.
I didn't
corner
even
of
know
a
pole
pub
dancing
going-
was happening here.
there are like championships and stuff. I've not been yet, and I really wanted to try. I've just been so busy with like getting the show together and other bits and pieces that I've not had a chance. But I did want to go and try and compete in, because they have big events like, and they are huge. Like they'll take over like the SECC and have like a huge pole dancing events, and there's like, you know, Miss Pole Dance Scotland and Male Pole Dancer of Scotland and combined and all that sort of thing. And apparently when you go to these competitions, it's probably a bit like, I don't know if you get really into like Iron Man, or though it's really intense,
Right.
and I think quite competitive, and there's probably some
Infighting
backstabbing and infighting that goes on in the really high levels, but
What
probably
is a
not
sitcom
for.
in that, isn't it?
Because I mean, it's like such a high skill and all that. Is the audience for that kind of creepy guys? No? Or is it people who appreciate the...
Well, Mark's come.
I just appreciate that. It's interesting technique.
It's just nice to see a non-male dominated industry.
I purposely not put me pole dancing on my poster or anything like that.
Do you think that would attract the wrong audience?
Probably not for me, Stephen. Come on, I'm a certain age now. Come on, I'd love to think that there's loads of guys that I'd have to be like, no, you're not coming in. But I don't think there's. I don't think there's a lot. I don't think. I think what I've realised is, like, when I say what I'm doing for the Fringe at other gigs, it's all women that are like, yes, woo! Yeah. And then, like, I would say that most of my work in progress shows have been very mixed. It's been like men and women, but it's the women that are getting in touch with me afterwards and being like, that was really cool and empowering, and it was really good to see. And the show is about self-love, as Stuart and I were
talking about this the other night.
chatting
No pole
about.
dancing in my show.
No pole dancing in Stuart's show. He
Unless I'm
doesn't
really
love himself
struggling.
as much as me. So it's about kind of getting, like, just being 40 and feeling like you're becoming irrelevant. And I suppose that's the other side of, when I started 20 years ago, I feel like I really had to fight to, like, get to probably where I am now 20 years later. And I now kind of feel like this is going to be difficult for me to maintain with the way that, do you know what I mean? You just feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to get asked to do the uni gigs anymore, which is fair enough because I'm 40, although I did do them all last year, but after a 10-year break, because I didn't know who Britney Spears was, and I had a Britney Spears joke, and they all just looked at me and I went, I'm never doing this again. And now Britney's back in the spotlight, so
Britney's back.
and I don't even have the joke anymore. I can't even remember what the joke was, but I just remember standing at Stirling University doing a joke of Britney Spears to 17-year-olds 10 years ago, and they're all like, who? Oh, for God's sake. So yeah, I suppose the show was a kind of me trying to figure out how I'm not irrelevant anymore. And, the flyer and the blurb that's going out to the press is all about, how do you keep up with the TikTokers and the, like, Instagrammers and the, influencers, and how, you guys have got this and you have made this amazing community. And I'm like, well, how am I going to be relevant in 2023? I'll go on a pole. I don't know what the connection in my brain was, but I was like, I'm going to do pole dance and that'll make me relevant.
It's a great idea. It must feel really gratifying, though, given what you said about when you started and the amount of resistance in the audience from men and women, and for fuck's sake, and that you've got to fight, and that's the default. And now 20 is on, you can go up there on a pole, and people are excited to see it. That must feel like a really rewarding.
Yeah, it is. I think that's been a big thing, and also, like, my last, not my last Fringe show, but I did 3 Fringe shows about my IVF journey. Really, I mean, all of them, they weren't, like, specifically about it. Jammy was the one that was most about, like, obviously I was pregnant when I did it, and it was all about how I'd got there, and it was all about luck and the luck of the draw when you do something like IVF. I think if you'd said to me 20 years ago, you'll do a show about your fertility problems, I would have been like, no, I won't. Nobody will come to that show. Not only did they come to it, but it got made into a radio show, and so that was a big, I suppose, realisation for me that was
great.
Yeah, the world has come on. It's nice.
Yeah.
How did you feel talking about, like, personal stuff like that in that way? Because it is, like, it's hard enough just doing stand-up about anything, really, but I always feel like when you're trying to bring in more personal stuff, like, you've got that added thing of, one, you're trying to get laughs, and also you're hoping to, because if you don't, then you're like, oh, fuck, it's not got a laugh, and I've told all these people this really personal stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but, like, I suppose when it goes well, then it's a really liberating feeling as well, and, like, a really cathartic one, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I've always told stand up from a place of truth. Like, so I always, all my materials always had some root in, like, my reality at that time. So when I first started stand up, I did a lot of stuff about having, gone out to LA, and, and then I did a lot of stuff about, kind of coming from Greenock and then I've always kind of done that kind of truth stuff because I find that much easier to sell if there's truth in the background, I guess. And I suppose when I did the IVF stuff, when I would find it really difficult would actually be if there was somebody in the audience and you can tell that it is something that they're going through. And like, so I've had like couples, I'll be telling a story and you'll see like a guy go like that to his wife or quite often two women in the audience who are going through IVF, and like you'll see you just know by their body language will change.
Yeah.
And I find that's when I've clocked that. I find it difficult because you feel like you're bringing up an uncomfortable subject for somebody else. So I try and keep it as light as possible. And, there's some things that I don't talk about. So I just think it's not funny to make light of, or, there's just no way to kind of make it more palatable. But yeah, I talked all about kind of having to do the injections and just that whole, like, even when I was pregnant, obviously I was 38 and being a geriatric mother and all, there's always a lot of geriatric mothers in venues.
That's wild, that's what they call it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because
I learned that from you. So.
Yeah, I learned that from you as well. Yeah.
See, if you're not laughing, you're learning,
You're
boys.
learning. We're laughing and learning. You can do both. All your shows usually have like a Scottish kind of word like bahookie, jammy and all that. What is that a conscious decision?
It's a Karen Corrin decision. That's like, no, it's fine.
I've heard that was it Greg Hemphill that was saying Karen Corrin came up with Still Game?
Still Game. No, so basically, I my very first show that I did with the Corrins at the Gilded Balloon was Bism. And Karen really liked the fact that it had a Scottish name. And then so the next one that I did was Wisht. And she really liked that. And then I did Jammy. And she was like, this is great. I'm loving this. And then I was supposed to do one called Hedgehog. But that was 2020.
There you go.
She was like, Karen had been like, I really wish that, it's up to you. And I love Karen. She's been so supportive of my career and everything. And I did feel like I was going against my mammy, telling me, you should. And then the pandemic happened, so it's really my fault.
Yeah,
because if I had called the show something Scottish. So when it came back in 2021, and I did the full run in 2021, and I did it with Blether. So,
that's right.
I went back to the Scottish words. It's actually good because, again, quite a lot of time people have no idea what the word means. So they've got no preconception of what they're coming to see, which is good.
That's a good point.
And you're showing the one about the poles called bahookie.
Yeah.
Is that a Scottish word as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It means bum.
And no, I don't know what it means.
I don't know if that would be
wouldn't know that was
British or
Scottish, I don't think.
yeah, British or Scottish.
Because I suppose Karen Corrin must name all Larry Dean shows as well, because he always calls me Fud Nut and all that. So it's like, that's all the ones that are a bit too rude for your titles that Larry gets.
I think also as well, I just went totally, so at the same time as I was naming all those shows initially, like Fern was like, doing her whole, I hate the Scottish cookie cut, I want to be as far away from Scottish as possible, and I'd be like, right, well, I'll take up that. Like, if she's not wanting that bit, I'll
Going out your own territory.
I'll take the Scottish stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And you've been doing some gigs down south recently, like I seen you hosting the Comedy Store and stuff like that. How did you find that?
Yeah, I love it. It's been great. I really like being the Comedy Store is one of the best rooms in the entire country. Like, it's, just the way they've set it up, and they've got like the soundproofing angled so that the laughs bounce back. So you could be terrible, but you sound great. As long as one person laughs, it echoes off. I really have been enjoying hosting those. They're really good fun. And also you're doing like 4, and you're doing 2 shows a night. So I think last time I did 5 shows in 3 days. So it feels like you're proper working.
It's a long way from Max Starr and Paisley, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a long way from
That's what got me here. I want to ask you about, because you mentioned your partner Keir, obviously, who not doing stand-up anymore, stuff, playwright and things like that. And you do have your wee boy now as well, which is great. I want to ask you one about, because this is a thing that comics always talk about. You always get a lot of comics talking about how I wouldn't date another comic and all this kind of stuff. You're husband was a comic, still
Yeah.
writer, all this kind of stuff. How do you feel about that? And because I always think people are protesting too much, right? Because see if you're a comic and you're going like that, I would never date a comic. What are you saying about yourself then? You're just saying you wouldn't date
They're a
yourself?
fucking head case.
You know what I mean?
But do you think that's coming from like a place of they might be jealous of the other person if they're getting more opportunities that they're not or whatever? Maybe they could find that hard to deal with. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
You've ground him into the dirt though. He's not even gigging anymore.
we were very
This
different.
town's not big enough for the both of
I
us.
know. We were very different, and he's like always wanted to be. I mean, comedy was a means to an end, really, which is sad because he was an amazing comedian. Like I used to, and still miss watching him because he was so, I'm a storyteller, and he's a gag merchant,
Yeah.
so. Over very, very different styles. Like I'll, take a long time to get to a punchline, but it's worth it when I get there. Whereas he would do, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm knackered watching you. Just gag. And whenever he comes to see me or like looks over my stuff, he's like, "Oh, you could do that and put that in there." And I'm like, "I'm not you." I like people to lean in to the story.
Go on a wee journey.
Go on a journey with me. So yeah, he is a phenomenal writer, and that's what he always wanted to do. And it was about getting to a place where the writing paid the bills.
Yeah.
And now it does. Yay! So, because the play that I wasn't in, thank God, because The Bench, he got, obviously it was made into, it was published as a book, and now it's been published in 6 different languages, and it's been performed all over the world, and
It's amazing.
yeah, so that was an amazing experience.
That's great.
And obviously, like, he does loads of writing for different bits and bobs.
Yeah. Do you ever pay him to get him to write some stuff for you, or you just
surely
like,
you're not
give me a
paying,
freebie, give me a freebie, please?
Well, she's rejecting his jokes.
That's true.
No, like definitely. We both. Like, we're a couple, right? So I suppose anybody, you've just get engaged. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Steve.
Thank
That's an
you.
exclusive on the podcast.
Nice.
Tell you more about that, like, tune in the Patreon over there.
Sorry.
Gather them in more detail.
We will
What, you
be
mean I'm not on the
paxing him in
Patreon?
next episode.
I thought I was getting paid for this, but time to go. So yeah, no, I mean, we've always worked together. So he'll, I usually I'm the first person to read anything that he's written.
Yeah.
And quite often I'll be like, well, my big thing is a woman wouldn't say that. That's my big kind of thing. And or I'll go, you just like, you trust each other. So yeah, he came to see the first. Keir, I always know when I've found a show that I really want to do, because Keir always hates the idea. So, like initially, and I always have to kind of bring him round to my idea. So he initially hated the pole dancing idea, just because he thought it was really too dangerous.
Right.
And he was really worried about me hurting myself.
Yeah.
He was right on that one, to be fair.
Yeah, no, he was really right. And he also couldn't really understand, because I was it's going to be about self-love, and it's going to be about, for women, particularly about your body and the way, like, I grew up in the 90s where nothing tastes as good as skinny feels and all of that. And like, because of the IVF, the relationship, I really had a hatred of my body, because I'd, initially been brought up to hate it by society, and then it let me down. So that kind of comes through in the show, but funny. And so he was the first person to come and see it. Or obviously there was other people in the room, but he came and seen the very first preview and gave me some pointers. And yeah, we don't really write for it because he doesn't really write for me, because it's probably too close.
Yeah.
In the same way that I wouldn't write dialogue for him, any of his scripts, but we do support each other and help with ideas. And when it comes to things like politics, so I do a lot of breaking the news, and Keir was a satirical comedian and was a political comedian, so he's wrote loads of bits that I've done on breaking the news.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to mention, because you mentioned about getting published around the world, and one of the times you were on Breaking the News, it ended up, I bet you done end up on the front page of the New York Times.
Yeah.
That must have been mental.
It was insane.
What
And
bit
actually,
was that?
it was about Brexit. was all about it. Actually, see now when you watch it, and it's like one of these things that's had like 127,000 like views and all that sort of stuff. And when you watch it now, you're like, it's so out of context. But in the time, it was me trying to explain what Brexit means. Brexit was
Right.
and it ended up on the front of the New York Times. A political editor used it to explain to Americans what
That's
Brexit
crazy. Isn't it?
was.
That's really cool.
That's insane.
So yeah, so it was good. But with my friend, like I didn't know anything about it, and then my friend from New York, that I used to hang out with when I was in LA, Adam, phoned me, and I hadn't heard from him in years, and he was like, "You're in the front of the New York Times." I was like,
That
"What?"
must be a scary thing to hear. Like,
What have I done?
I know. I was literally like, "What? Oh my god!" And then then they sent me a screenshot of it, but on the front was like a Holly festival, like in India, and I'm like, I wasn't even there. What are you talking about? So it wasn't like a picture of me. It was just the text
Right.
of like they basically take my text. I never get paid for that either.
No.
did
That's
they,
pretty cool, though.
did they say it was you that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You got
Yeah.
credited.
I get credit.
Hope it's going to put a lot of confused American tourists bums on seats for your Fringe show.
Yeah.
Sit our bahookie down. Here we go.
Well, when I did BISM, I had in the very first night, I had these two French exchange student young boys. They were only about 17 or 18 in my front row because they thought it was bosoms. So they might be back this year because there is some pole dancing.
And obviously, you're saying you and Kev get the wee boy now, and like how's it been like being a mum in general, and how's that affected your comedy? Would you say is it been a rich vein of comedy that's came for it, or is it just maybe changed your perspective in any way?
I tend not to really talk about my wee boy on stage. Now and again, I mention him, and I do things like Bad Parents Club on BBC Radio Scotland, and I will tell stories about him there. But like we don't put him on social media. We don't like. I feel like he very much needs his. He doesn't need to suffer for what I do.
Yeah.
I would feel absolutely. Sometimes I see comedians doing things that are particularly now when they're filmed. And, you know, obviously, like comedy quite often is not real, and like comedians will be saying stories about their kids and like, hating their kids, or you know, and it might not. Like, it's quite often not true stories. And I just think, I don't know how I would have felt if at the age of 15 I looked back on my mum's back catalogue and she was like, that wee arsehole in the house, you know. So I don't generally talk about him, but he definitely has informed me as a person. Being a mother has informed how I feel about things. And like Gareth Waugh and I were chatting about this recently. Like as soon as I had Otis, a lot of like any sort of like movies or anything that comes on the news where it's like violence against children, anything is horrendous. Do you know what I mean? You can't watch anything like that. Or if you start watching, you know, a Netflix show and like there's a kid kidnapped or something like that, you're like, no, can't be dealing with that. You become a lot more sensitive.
Yeah,
I think.
I wonder as well, because you say like, because obviously when you had him, like it would have been just not far off 20 years you've been doing stand up, which obviously like, you know, when you're pursuing like a quite individualistic career like stand up is, like it must be quite an interesting perceptive shift to like then suddenly your world like becomes about the kid, and that's something I always wonder about, like if I was ever to have kids and stuff, like how would that affect it and stuff like that, like how has that been for you?
I think it's just felt quite natural.
Yeah.
Like, as I say, like I don't really do. I've done some stories. Like I have a story about potty training my son, and that's probably the one story that's I've kind of really done about him on stage. I did a whole thing when we were potty training him. But generally, most of my material, and particularly like when I was pregnant, was about how it affected me because we're all narcissistic. So I suppose what I still talk about is how being a mother affects me, rather than stories about him.
Aye. And how is that? How has it affected you then?
I think I'm a lot calmer as a person. I'm not as things used to really annoy me now before, and now I just just let it go. I'm not as quick to anger. And yeah, I'm really happy. I think he's the best thing in the whole world, like, and he's hilarious and he makes me laugh. And you know, if this all went tomorrow, that would be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
As long as I have him, nothing else, that's it. So I'm not as, I don't know, needy about stand-up being the be-all and the end-all of the world.
That's good.
So
So have Wayne's, right? He's all like, no care
I've
who
met him,
got...
funny kid. How would you feel if he wanted to be in stand-up?
I wouldn't be chuffed. I
Really?
would support him. Obviously. Not just because it's so tough. Like, you don't want that for your kids. You want your kids to have, an easy life.
Stability.
Like, my dad wanted me to have an easy life, and he worked, so hard to allow me to not have to, struggle the way that he struggled. And, I'll do the same for my child. My brother does the same for his child. And I think like that's the thing, isn't it? You're always kind of wanting. So I wouldn't, because he's so little, the thought of him being rejected the way that you are as a stand-up, just absolutely,
It's heartbreaking.
it's heartbreaking. And I think, a lot of people say their parents can't come to watch them. My mum and dad, my dad particularly, has always come to see. He's seen every single one of my Fringe shows. When I first started out, he would come all the time to come and see me. And he's always been really, really supportive. But I do understand, which is quite difficult because a lot of the time I've done stories where he doesn't come out in the best light. He once came to one of my Fringe shows and it was a sold out run. And but it was way up the very top of these stairs at the Gilded Balloon. It was Bism. And he said he was waiting in the queue and there wasn't that many people waiting. And the guy behind him went, I hope this is going to busy up because it's not very good. There's not that many people waiting. He went, oh no, this show is sold out. This whole run is sold out. And he went, oh, do you know the person? He goes, oh, aye, it's my daughter. My dad hadn't seen the show yet. Then he came in and in the show I did a whole story about my dad telling me that I had a pacemaker, which I didn't, to teach me a lesson. And the guy was sitting in front of my dad and I'm telling this story and at one point the guy just turned around and went,
That's great.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you've done like comedy workshops with kids, right? Mm-hmm. How's that?
It's great, yeah. So I run the Stands kids comedy course. So I go into schools usually with in the transition years, so primary 6 and 7, as they're transitioning to the upper part of the school or into high school, and we do 6 weeks. So a workshop every week for 6 weeks, and they write, and then at the end they perform at the Stand. And
what are they like? What's the stuff like?
They're amazing. They're so much better than most Red Raws. Honestly, I'm right. It's brilliant because you see, it's all about self-confidence, right, and their self-esteem, and it's about getting them to communicate. And there's a lot of kids now, obviously, because schools are so kind of led by the curriculum for excellence, and there'll be kids who have the autistic spectrum and things like that, who have a totally different viewpoint and maybe at times find it quite hard to communicate with their peers. So we've had kids really make big steps forward and big connections with their peers through stand-up, through telling them something funny about the way they see the world or how they see them interacting with the world, which is good.
Cool.
A lot of parents get it in the neck, lots of dad jokes.
Is it mainly about, because I was wondering what is the material, is it about parents mainly or teachers or?
It's generally
What's the hack for
It's exactly the same as an adult stand-up show where it's now, I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD.
I've completed Tinder.
There's lots of toilet humour, lots of having a poo, so Liam better watch out. There's lots of going to the toilet, dad's farting, lots of dad's farting. Think of that for your CBBCs, your self-tape, do a bit of farting in there. That's
farting all the way through yourself. It's not in the script.
What the kids want.
Kids love the kids love a farting joke. But sometimes they'll do really surreal stuff. We had one this girl actually who I'd worked with. It was in a different course that I ran over the Easter holidays for Edinburgh Youth Theatre, and this wee girl came and she just did this surreal, just the most surreal set about cheese. She had a whole world of cheese, and there was a cheese king and queen, and like the cheese empire, and she had lots of cheese puns. But it was just really kind of, surreal, Mike
cool.
Bosch kind of like bizarre. She was 8,
great.
and it was fantastic. You get one-liners, you get them doing political stuff. With a kid went on a rant about Trump. Like, yeah, so I think kids are a lot more
Switched on
than they were, because one thing that my wee boy did quite recently, this weekend, was he said something and I really started laughing at it, and he turned to me and he goes, if you enjoyed that, leave a comment below, like and follow in the app. And I went, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's like that is enough Ryan's World for you.
That is scary. My wee niece and nephew will do that if they're just playing, then they'll be like, leave a comment and subscribe, and do a wee American accent, and it's bizarre.
You need to get them in so they can do the fucking plugs at the end, because they sound like they're better than you do.
They are better than me. I'll give you that.
But what I find quite funny about doing the stuff with the kids is, of course, I'm going in there and they don't know who I am, and that's why I have to be quite careful about some of my clips that are up and things like that.
Yeah.
Because they'll go and kind of look you up on and try and so I'm quite careful about what goes on now, and like how it's locked down so they can't see it and stuff. But the thing that usually if you're doing an adults comedy workshop, you'll be like, right, so I've gigged with like the likes of Frankie Boyle and blah blah blah, and you're like Kevin Bridges and Daniel Sloss, Larry Dean, all men, Fern Brady,
Susan Calvin,
Sarah Millican.
I've been on some live podcast.
So you'll say that to adults, and like when the kids will go that to you, do you know? And they'll name some like
Mr. Blobby or something.
they'll
That's
name
To the corporate Mr. Tumble.
they'll name some like YouTube
Ain't fucking Britney
acts
Spears
that
are
I've
they?
never heard of, and I'm just like, they're like, have you ever gigged with such and such? I'm like, no, I don't know who that is. They're like, what? Oh my god, he's like 7 million hits on, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know him. They're like, has he ever played the stand? I'm like, no, I don't think so. I'm like, I've gigged with Frankie Boyle. They're like, who? I was like, ask your dad. Like, they're not
to
impressed
explain
by
to some
me.
poor 8-year-old how the YouTube is a hack that short-circuited the circuit
Yeah.
and gets it easy.
I don't know. It wasn't that easy when I was starting out. So. That's a scary insight into the future for us all. But listen, Jay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
you very much.
Before we go, just let
Like and subscribe.
anybody like and subscribe.
comment
We will
underneath.
get to that in a minute, but before that, do you want to plug in? Obviously, you got your Fringe show coming up. But what time's it on and what dates is it?
So it's on the 2nd to the 28th, not the 22nd
Of August.
Of August, 6:20 p.m. at the Gilded Balloon TV.
Sweet.
Smash.
Edinburgh Fringe
Recommend.
tickets on sale for Jay for that one. And as I say, I have seen some of the poll. I actually gave Jay a note that our pole dancing was actually too good, and she has to kind of tone it down a wee bit if she's wanting a big laugh at the bit where she's maybe struggling with it.
Which is bizarre because the one you saw was the one where I cracked my ribs.
That's right. You styled it out. But well, as ever, guys, do please like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can follow us at SomewherePod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and send any question you've got to the guys at somewherepod@gmail.com. But until next time, we'll speak to you soon.
Cheers, Jay.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jay.
guys.
Thanks very much.